Good afternoon. Hi, I'm Doug Loud, speaking for O&M Partners, and I want to welcome everybody to the Nanalysis Scientific Corp Town Hall webinar. Nanalysis trades on 3 exchanges, the TSX-V, the OTCQX, and the French exchange. So those of you who like symbols, the symbol for the TSX-V is NSCI, the QX symbol is NSCIF, and the French symbol is 1N1. Now, for those of you who are new to our broadcasts, you need to know that O&M acts as a link between the investing public and public companies. In the past times, you could think of these groups as passing each other like ships in the night. But O&M has developed a digital roadmap that enables us to keep pace with the tremendous changes in investor demographics and how they receive information. We want this broadcast to answer all of your questions. So your questions can easily be answered by going to the question panel of the GoToWebinar itself or by emailing us. For any questions that remain unanswered, we'll follow up in a timely manner after the call. For those of you who've dialed in by phone, the only way you can hear our pre-recorded introductory presentation is on your computer speakers. If that's not possible, you'll be able to hear the main presentation after about 7 or 8 minutes. So please stay tuned. Now, before we hear from the CEO of Nanalysis, we're going to hear from Matt Sellers, their investment relations manager. He's going to provide us with a brief overview of Nanalysis and some context. Now, Matt is a finance professional with a deep understanding of financial and strategic decision-making processes, coupled with extensive experience in the international capital markets. At Nanalysis, Matt plans and executes capital market communications and strategies for financing. He executes investor outreach programs and informs on corporate strategy.
Thank you for that introduction. First, I'll go through a high-level description of our device. Effectively, it's similar to a device that you'd find in almost any hospital around the world. Magnetic resonance imaging, MRI machines are very common, and we use the same molecular phenomena, which is to apply magnetic force at the subatomic level and the atomic level. And so what happens is our device, instead of producing an image, produces something that looks akin to an EKG or something, an output from a Richter scale. Then to normal human beings, like myself, it doesn't make much sense, but to PhD chemists, they can use that output and understand what the shape, size, and concentration of a solution is at the molecular level. So, for example, we can use this in cannabis trim. So what happens is you trim the flower and they can sell that in the stores or what have you. But what they need to know in order to produce optimal results is when you have, say, extra leaf or the stalk, is there enough cannabis content, i.e. CBD or THC content in that extra trim in order to justify processing? So we can do non-destructive tests of that kind. And right now, the market for nuclear magnetic resonance spectrometers sits around $1 billion globally. And so most of that market right now is made up of high field, large machines. These machines, as you're about to hear, are the size of a room. They have to have a professional operator. They have to be liquid cooled with liquid nitrogen, and they're very difficult, very sensitive machines. Now, our machine is quite a bit more resilient. It uses permanent magnets, so no cryogens. And so effectively, you can reset the machine or recalibrate the machine with just the press of a button. It takes about 30 seconds to a minute. So how is this market going to grow? As I said, these are the existing tech that's been around for about 30 to 40 years with using these high field devices, the size of a room, sometimes as heavy as a truck. These devices can't be put into a manufacturing plant. They can't be put in situ. So our devices are very stable, very small. They can be put in glass-proof cases, and they can be put into very hostile environments. Think oil refineries, chemical plants, not to mention R&D labs and research facilities around the world. So we expect not only to take some, but not all of the existing billion-dollar market, but we expect that this market will grow substantially. It's worth noting that every other major chemical analytical instrument has gone through the process of miniaturization. NMR is the last device to do so, the last class of devices to do so. And so I think and we believe that there's a very strong possibility this would be hitting an inflection point in terms of industry adoption very, very soon. And there's good reasons to believe that. And so one of the reasons we believe that so strongly is because we have seen a lot of interest from a number of different major corporations around the world, major industries, all coming together and saying, we want to look more closely. And an example of that is an announcement that we just made late last year with the LKA, which is the police force of Lower Saxony in Germany. And in collaboration with them, we put our devices in mobile police labs so that they can do on-the-ground testing in real time of suspicious substances. Now, of course, NMR is still being used every day by police forces and security forces and drug companies of all kinds. But what our device can do is identify whether or not a suspicious powder is fentanyl or heroin or not. And it can do it within minutes. There's no need to send it away to a drug lab and take days and days. You can make the arrest with a high degree of certainty at that time, rather than, letting the potential dealer go and then maybe having to track him down again, wasting time and resources. Additionally, when you deploy these things, we believe that when you can deploy these things throughout a police force or a group of police forces in collaboration, what our devices can do is, let's say a fentanyl shipment comes into San Diego Harbor, and for whatever reason, some but not all of the shipment is caught at the harbor that day. So we can see that test being done. It'll go up into a cloud database, and as the shipment moves throughout its supply chain and additives are put in as cutting agents and what have you, you can see the major distribution hubs for that particular shipment, and each one will have a unique chemical fingerprint. So one batch of fentanyl will not look the same to a PhD chemist, i.e. our machine or the user of our machine, as the next batch. There'll be a slight difference in how the chemical reaction took place on the manufacturing end, and we'll be able to identify that. Now, how is that useful? Why should you care? The reason why you should care is we'll be able to say, okay, this particular batch of drugs that happens to have a fatality rate of X is now moving, and we know the supply chain because of past mappings, so we can tell that this map of drugs will hit, say, Boulder, Colorado in 3 days from San Diego. And so we can, or the police forces will be able to notify their partners over in Boulder, Colorado, or wherever else, hey, this particular batch is coming through. We're seeing a high risk, high fatality rate from users, and you should probably increase your frontline hospital staff, perhaps get some Narcan kits for overdoses, and perhaps even deploy more frontline police officers to stop this shipment. So we think that this is only one of the many, many applications, and Shawn, our CEO and founder, will be pleased to walk you through more of these in just a moment here. But we think this is an exciting opportunity, and we welcome any questions you might have for Shawn after the presentation. Thanks for your time, and I hope you join us as shareholders.
Thank you, Matt. That was very interesting. Now we'd like to turn to Shawn Krakewski, who's the President, Chief Executive Officer, and founder of Nanalysis. Nanalysis is Mr. Krakewski's third startup in over a 20-year period. He has raised over $25 million in equity financing for those companies. As an example, one of the companies he previously founded and created was a high-performance computing company called Accelaware that provided software solutions to harness the parallel processing capabilities of multi-core GPUs and CPUs for the electronic design and oil and gas industries. Mr. Krakewski has an MS and a BSSC in electrical engineering from the University of Calgary, and we look forward to hearing from him about his fascinating company. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. So Nanalysis is poised to be the global leader in MRI for industrial applications. And I'm sure you all know what an MRI machine is. Maybe you've seen one, and hopefully you're saying to yourself, what does he mean by for industrial applications? And I'll try to layer on top of what Matt has already said as I go through the presentation. We seek safe harbor for forward-looking statements. So essentially what we've done is we've miniaturized an MRI machine. Instead of having very large superconducting magnets that require liquid helium and liquid nitrogen to keep them cool, we've used permanent magnet-based systems. We've miniaturized the electronics, and there's no requirement for liquid helium and liquid nitrogen. So instead of a very large instrument that weighs more than your car, it's a toaster-sized or microwave-sized device that you can pick up, put in the back of your car, drive home and put it in your kitchen if you want. Of course, our customers use it for industrial applications. On this slide here, we've depicted the application from a customer called Albemarle, which is one of the largest mining companies in the world. And they use our instrument, which is depicted towards the bottom in the second graphic there, to measure lithium content in their lithium brine pools, which has been very difficult for them to do in the past. And they use it for R&D, for QA/QC, and also to help their manufacturing with lithium. As Matt has indicated, there's many other applications that this is suitable for, pharmaceutical applications, food applications, the energy industry, law enforcement, and so on and so forth. Here's some of the customers that we sell to. So we sell to the biggest customers in the world, as well as like tiny, two-person biotech startups. We sell to the largest universities in the world that are doing world-class research, as well as community colleges. And we also sell to government labs. We sell direct in the United States, Canada, Germany, Switzerland, Austria, and now France, where we have our European headquarters. And then in international markets like Indonesia, Japan, Chile, Argentina, we sell through a network of over 45 dealers around the world who sell complementary products and services. So they're knocking on the same doors as we would be if we had direct presences in those particular markets. We are very excited about this opportunity that we're facing here. It's a nascent market opportunity. We created a category of a new class of instrument. We've been doing very well over the last couple of years, and we're really poised to scale our business going forward. It's a massive market opportunity that we're facing. Scientific instrumentation, or as some people prefer, analytical instrumentation, is a massive global market that's growing, over 5% per year compounded. Well over $60 billion per year is spent on instrumentation to do test and measurement, which is the space that we're in. As Matt indicated, about $1 billion per year is currently spent on nuclear magnetic resonance. I want to just point out that $1 billion per year is independent of the MRI machines that are in hospitals. It is used for test and measuring, and so it's even a bigger market if you include the MRIs that's used in the life sciences and hospital environments. We think that $1 billion per year market opportunity for magnetic resonance for test and measurement can increase dramatically by several $1 billion per year over the next 5 years or so, with two main growth drivers. Now that the technology has been miniaturized and can be deployed in many different types of places, including mobile labs, it's becoming standard equipment. And then the second growth driver is new applications that in the past, people didn't think, oh, you'd ever use a scientific instrument for that particular application. And one that actually surprised me that I didn't think of when I founded the company about 11 years ago is analyzing bunker fuel on cargo ships. So over a year ago, a large German company called Bosch approached us and said, we want to be able to analyze the bunker fuel that's on these cargo ships for environmental reasons, and also because it damages the large engines. And these are very expensive, Rolls-Royce and Cummins engines that get damaged over time if you put cheap bunker fuel in them. So there's an example of an application that I didn't foresee when I started the company. That is a tremendous growth driver for us going forward. So we're growing our company through organic means by establishing OEM partnerships, by launching new products, by penetrating new vertical markets, and we're also executing an M&A strategy. So that's the main reason why we went public, by the way. It wasn't to raise money, it's because there was 5 companies that we wanted to buy. I mean, we wanted to pay largely with public currency and have a lot of transparency in our company so that the founders that we were buying would have more trust and would want to partner with us rather than being a private company with less transparency and so on. So we're proud to say that we did close our first acquisition in March, and I think before the end of this year, investors are going to see the tremendous fruit of that acquisition. It's been delayed a little bit because of the COVID situation, but again, well before the end of the year, you're going to see the tremendous benefits that came from bolting on that business to ours. And when I say an M&A strategy, I want to emphasize it's not a roll-up, and it's certainly not sort of entailing searching for companies that we might want to buy. It's a very targeted approach, and essentially it's 5 companies that we've been communicating with several years, built a relationship with, that are totally complementary to our business, that we want to bolt on to be larger than the sum of the parts. So that sort of encapsulates what our growth strategy is going forward. I want to emphasize one aspect of it that Matt talked about a little bit, and that is that this approach of analyzing substances in a non-destructive way has been well established as the gold standard in our industry. But the problem is, as we've mentioned many times, the machines are very expensive, very large, very complex, unsafe to use. The output is difficult to interpret. So on this slide, I'm depicting the output of a typical nuclear magnetic resonance spectrometer. And what we're all about is amplifying this technique so that the user is not an expert with a PhD, but rather a technician who looks at a red light or a green light, or maybe one number being amount of THC in this cannabis oil, or is this fentanyl or is it not fentanyl? What's the percent lithium in this brine pool, and so on. So all about the amplification of this very important technique, or simplifying it. Here's a look at our current product portfolio. You can see we have a range of products for analyzing the different types of substances, and all the way down from accessories that are $5,000, $7,000 to products that have a list price of over $150,000 US. We're very proud to talk about the accomplishments we've had in manufacturing and cost reduction, and we've been able to achieve over 65% gross margins, and we think we can even push those higher going forward. Software is also a very important part of our product mix, and will continue to be will have growing importance going forward, including an initiative to add a software as a service, sort of recurring revenue dimension to our revenue model going forward. Right now, I know it's one of the questions that I always get. Our revenue model is capital equipment at pretty healthy gross margins, but that will be complemented in the future with software as a service and also consumables. Our products are not only manufactured in our facility and designed in our facility, but they're highly patent protected. We have 3 current patents in the United States, as well as several other jurisdictions that have been granted to us. We do file in 10 jurisdictions around the world, including China, and we have an exciting patent pipeline as well for new products and technologies that we're developing that are all in the same space. As I've indicated, we do 100% of our manufacturing in our facility in Calgary, Canada, where most of our people are today. And that's important because we have proprietary manufacturing processes, we have AI, we have machine learning processes that essentially make it extremely difficult for our products and technologies to be reverse engineered. So for example, if you got a hold of one of our instruments in China, you took it apart, you had 5 PhDs that were smart enough to understand our patents, you still wouldn't be able to copy our technology unless you knew exactly what we were doing in our proprietary manufacturing processes in our facility right here in Canada. We have a fabulous management team. Dr. Greg McFeeters and Dr. Garrett Leskowitz are the co-founders with me. They were the two technologists that I brought on at the beginning 11 years ago to start our IP strategy and technology development, and then eventually our product development. And as we've gone from phase to phase over the years, we've added on fabulously talented people to our team. We also have a senior independent board of directors. Martin Burian is our chairman. He is the gentleman who helped me take the company public about a year ago and sort of represents the new money that came in. We did a $6.5 million concurrent financing last June at 60 cents per share. Martin has really great investment banking and M&A experience, so he's sort of riding shotgun with me as our corporate, our VP of corporate development as we do these acquisitions. Werner Gartner is our chairman of our audit committee. He's a former CFO of Novotel GPS, which is a billion-dollar company that was trading on the NASDAQ when he was their CFO. Dr. Michael Okoniewski is a world-renowned scientist in this technology area. Guido Klotens is a new addition to our board, and he's basically the representative of our investors in Europe. We have a tremendous following, mostly in Belgium and the Netherlands, but also growing in Germany and France as well. So we're happy to have Guido join our team, extensive financial professional. Here's a look at our cap table. So today we have 65 million outstanding shares. So you know where our stock is trading today. It's sort of market cap of $35 million approximately. We have a high degree of insider ownership, and that's using the formal definition of insider ownership. If you use sort of a broader definition, which would include the angel investors that have backed us for 11 years, it would be about 75%. So very tight float with a lot of very strong supporters who had multiple opportunities to exit even before we went public. But they decided that they wanted to put more money into our business and keep us growing independent. So really strong group of investors that are really got us to where we are today and want to stick around for the next 5 to 10 years as well as we build a billion-dollar company. So all in all, we just have fabulous people. Now we have a group of people in Strasbourg, which is in the heart of Europe, right on the border with Switzerland and Germany, where we have a lot of customers and partners, very well-educated, committed people. These are all shareholders in our company. They've had opportunity to earn equity over the years. So we're just really optimistic about how our people are going to drive our business going forward. So that's the end of the presentation. I'm happy to answer any more questions you might have.
Thank you very much. That was quite interesting. Let me see if any of our panelists have some questions. Ian Hunter, do you have any questions today?
Oh, hi, Shawn. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hi. Thanks for the presentation today. Can you talk a little bit more about the acquisition in March and how you feel that acquisitions like these will contribute in a complementary way to your business?
Absolutely. So I think what I'm going to do is flip. Hopefully everybody can still see my screen. I've moved over to the product screen. There's three main technology modules, if you will, when you're trying to build one of these instruments, and in particular, trying to build a miniature version. One is the magnet system, which is the most difficult part of miniaturizing this. That's why it's taken so long for these machines to go from the size of your car down to the size of a toaster. And we were the best in the world at that. We are the best in the world at that. When I say we were, I'm referring to where our focus was when I founded the business, where we put most of our money and most of our intellectual energy on for the first 5 to 7 years. It was miniaturizing the magnet system. And we also worked on electronics and software, but I wouldn't say we were the best in the world at those two items. And so what we did is we acquired a company who is the best in the world at the electronics part of it. And they had a product that they were selling independently to the large installations and replacing the old cumbersome electronics with modern, new, small, better performing electronics. And we adopted that technology as part of our existing product line. So we made one of their electronics modules the heart of our product. And so in addition to that sort of technology tuck-in aspect of it, they're also selling into the MRI industry. In other words, the actual imaging industry into clinical and preclinical systems, not the full system itself, but again, this electronics module. And so we've always believed that analyzing substances and creating images of things, whether it's eggs, whether it's mice used in a benign way for pharmaceutical research, was the same thing. I mean, the output was different, but the technology platform was the same thing. So we bought this company mostly for shares. The founders now are VP of sales, a very successful guy in building sales organizations in this industry, and so they got us into the imaging part of our space, as well as the other aspects of it that we've talked about, and again, building a common technology platform. And I think that sort of foreshadows also what we're looking at doing on the software side going forward is adding a software entity to our business that has a recurring revenue model. They're also going to be our direct sales headquarters right in the heart of Europe. So they double as that aspect of it as well. You should see significant top line from that company, added on to whatever you might extrapolate our top line being from previous financials that you've seen. Their top line hasn't hit us yet, but we think it's going to hit us in a material way this year, and then in a very exciting way in 2021.
Thank you.
How about Martin DeBovis? Do you have any questions today, Martin?
I'm sorry. My microphone was off. I didn't realize that.
Oh, there you go, Martin. Thank you.
Okay, is your marketplace going to be mostly medical, or be mostly policing?
I heard you say ask if it would be mostly medical, but then I didn't hear the last.
The policing aspect of it. I heard you running tests with different entities.
Oh, I see. The policing, yeah. So the way I'm going to answer that question is that we have several OEM partnerships that are percolating, and to go deep in vertical markets like the ones you've mentioned will require strong partnerships with companies like Bosch, companies like Philips, companies like Shimadzu. So right now the story hasn't been written on what vertical we're going to have the most success in. I can tell you that today, with our existing revenue, it's the pharmaceutical industry where we're selling the most into, and they're using our instrument primarily in their R&D labs, and also for a little bit of QA/QC. But that's the exciting thing about magnetic resonance, is that it has very wide applications, and so of course we cannot penetrate all of those verticals on our own, but that's why we're about partnerships. And just to give you a little bit more color in maybe an unexpected way about the breadth of applications that this technology applies to, because this technology is non-destructive, and also there's no dose. And so what I mean by no dose is it's not like an X-ray where your molecules and your atoms are actually bombarded with particles that have a mass. This is not the case. So you can analyze precious things. In fact, you can even analyze things that are alive. And so we have a really exciting and innovative application partner that wants to use our instrument to analyze human embryos in a way that's ethical, and so on and so forth. And so you wouldn't be able to do that with a mass spectrometer or with other types of spectrometers. But with magnetic resonance, you can absolutely do that, even with the most fragile and precious types of substances.
Well, that's really exciting. Well, thank you very much. It's really have to study your company a little bit more. It's fairly interesting.
My
Thank you.
pleasure. Thanks for the question.
Let's see, we turn now, if we can, to Victor Zhao.
Doug, I have a question that came from the audience in the meantime. Here it is. To what extent do your patents protect you from competition? In other words, how big is your moat?
Yeah, excellent question. So, you know, we're fairly confident that we've erected some serious barriers to entry with regards to how you can miniaturize these things. So, maybe the best way to understand that is we do have an arch competitor who we compete with every day all over the world. It's a company that's of similar size to us. It's a company called Magritech, based out of New Zealand, believe it or not. They have an excellent product, but if you compare it on an apples to apples basis, it's about 2.5 times the size and weight as ours. And it's because they've used a slightly different approach, which has affected their ability to miniaturize it to the extent that we have. And so, for example, a lot of our customers use our products inside what's called a glove box. You may have seen the show CSI Miami, where somebody's got their arms in kind of these rubber tubes with gloves on the end, and they're working with toxic substances or substances that are air sensitive inside. Well, our instrument can fit in one of those glove boxes that those people are working in, and in particular, they can fit in the large port of those glove boxes that is used to bring equipment in and out of. Well, our competitor's product cannot fit inside that port. Also, mobile labs where you know, you're driving around and you've got multiple pieces of equipment in your lap, and space and weight is at a premium, and you don't want unnecessary things or volume in there. And our product is fabulous for that type of mobile application where our competitors is not. So miniaturization, which is the hardest thing to do with this technology from an IP perspective, and our patents have protected our particular approach of doing that.
Great, thank you. And I did hear from Victor. He chatted in his question. Thank you, Victor. What are the elements and substances that can be detected?
I'm going to interpret that question as what are the elements and substances that can be analyzed, but I'll also sort of touch on, you know, I'll also try to incorporate the question about detection as well. So, so I'll give some examples, and then I don't want to be redundant, but I'll also just say that there's many different types of substances that can be analyzed. But one of them, for example, that we haven't talked about is olive oil. So customers can determine if let's say they're on the receiving end of a commodities trade, and they're taking possession of $10 million worth of extra virgin olive oil. Well, they can very easily test it at multiple points along the value chain. Is it actually extra virgin olive oil, or has it been adulterated with cheap soy oil, which happens all the time, by the way. Most of the time, the adulteration happens with harmless things that it's just intended to save money. But other times it's adulterated with harmful things like aniline. And you can look and see in the news where, you know, in Italy, 80 people died because of somebody tainting olive oil with aniline, which is a filler, a synthetic filler. So foodstuffs like olive oil, new drug maybe being designed at Pfizer, where they've spent $100 million designing a new drug, and they've gotten it to a certain stage, and maybe they only have micrograms of the compounds that they've just developed, and they want to be able to measure it over and over again without altering it in any way. Petrochemicals, so whether it's bunker fuel or crude oil or jet fuel, like analyzing the quality of jet fuel. Cannabis, we've talked about that several times, illicit drugs. So lithium is a really interesting application. So in that case, it's actually detecting a lithium content and measuring lithium directly. In other cases, you're doing the measurement of the particular compound of interest indirectly, but sometimes it's directly. And not to get too technical on you, but it has to do with subjecting the atoms and the molecules of the substance of interest to a known magnetic field with very particular characteristics, very known and strong magnetic field. And then those molecules and the atoms in the molecules behave in a very specific way that essentially is like, whispering to us and telling us what they are. So, a hydrogen atom will say, hello, I'm hydrogen atom and I'm in an ethane molecule. And there's this many of me in this vial of liquid that you've put in the instrument. And maybe that's a good also is we haven't really mentioned exactly how the substances are measured. So first thing that I should say is that it's done in a standard way. So we don't require the customer to do anything that they're not used to. They're already accustomed to how to prepare their sample and put it in the instrument. Usually that is the sample is put in a 7-inch long glass tube with a 5 millimeter diameter. And if the substance of interest is a solid or let's say a powder, it would be dissolved in say 0.7 milliliters of standard solvent. Like chloroform, for example, is a common solvent that everybody uses. If it's already a liquid, like if it's an oil of some kind, then they'll just put 0.7 milliliters of that oil in the standard glass tube, and that glass tube gets put into the top of the instrument, and then the user presses a button, and depending on the concentration of that particular substance, they could get their answer in 4 seconds, like there's 13% lithium in this fluid. Or if it's like the micrograms of some new drug that Pfizer's developing or something, they might have to wait minutes and so on to get their answer. But whatever it is, it's something that the user expects and that they're accustomed to doing in our industry already.
Great, thank you. And to follow up on that, because we had another question written in, was asking if you could talk some about the various other food science applications that could be used with the technology.
Yeah, one that comes to mind is we have actually a significant investor in our company, and this is public domain information. So it's a company called Natural Factors, and they're the largest manufacturer of nutraceuticals in North America. And they make everything from echinacea-based products. They're starting to get into CBD products with cannabis, and also things like fish oils for the nutraceutical industry. And so there's an application that we've been working with on them on how to protect the North American nutraceutical industry from cheap and sometimes harmful nutraceuticals that come from offshore places like China, which undercut our manufacturers on price, but often introduce harmful or not efficacious compounds in their nutraceuticals. So that's the other application that comes to mind, and it's sort of tied to a pretty exciting partner that last year invested $1.5 million in our company, again at a price that's higher than what we're trading at now, by the way.
Wonderful, thank you. Another question is, when you go into a new vertical, do you have to develop custom software for that vertical?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and I'll maybe flip to the application slide. So one of the powerful things about magnetic resonance is that it's very general in nature. So in order to get some initial traction in a new vertical, we can do so with the general purpose output, the output that looks like what's on the left-hand side of this screen. So that sort of gets us in the door. It helps us working with their experts. But then to really drive adoption within that vertical, to simplify the output, then extra software has to be written. So in some cases, if the application is very simple, we write it ourselves and deploy it ourselves. And an example of that is one that I've talked about for lithium content. So we wrote a little app on top of our regular software to specifically produce a number of percent lithium. And now the non-expert users at our lithium customers just look at that one number. They don't look at the complicated output, they just look at the one number. There's other more complex applications where you need 30 years of domain expertise in that particular area in order to be able to write the software. And so with those types of applications, our strategy is to work with third-party customers. And one example of that comes to mind is to be able to evaluate the terpenes that are in cannabis products. So our basic software can quantify THC and CBD very well, but our basic software isn't able to look at the terpenes, which are like modulators of the THC and CBD that affect scent and flavor and so on. But there's really exciting partnerships that we're developing with software companies that are experts in looking at cannabis products only, and their software actually can, using the data from our hardware and from the basic part of our software, can actually resolve what the terpenes look like. And so so complicated applications will be and are with third-party software experts who focus in on that particular vertical.
Great, thank you. This one just came in. Are you confident in the supply of rare earth magnets given the supply chain disruptions that are becoming more prevalent?
Oh, that's an excellent question. So, so the first thing to say is that the rare earth materials that are used in these magnets, and by the way, in our instrument, it's neodymium iron boron magnets. Our vendor right now is a company out of Boston, just a fabulous company. We have used other vendors in the past, but we have sort of a primary vendor. And it's important to say that these rare earth materials are readily available all over the planet. But it is also true, which I think is sort of the implication of the question possibly, that because of certain economic conditions like cheap labor, the mines that have been the most economically viable have been in China. But we've seen the United States Department of Defense respond very aggressively to this potential threat, which is not just to us, but all kinds of other types of industries and customers in NATO countries. And so what we've seen is that as the United States has taken aggressive action, that prices have stabilized and are fallen. Mines in other parts of the world, like Australia, and there's a Molycorp mine in California. That economic activity reacts. There's actually, even in our neck of the woods, in Alberta, this material is plentiful, and of course we have a very rich and proud mining tradition in our province. And there's new mines being developed specifically for rare earth metals to target the defense applications for the United States and all NATO countries. And in fact, we're tangentially involved in one of those, not in a material way now, but possibly it might evolve into a material way in a couple of years with regards to a JV where we will partner with somebody, mostly as a first customer of rare earth magnets using materials from the province of Alberta. And of course, that would have a tremendous impact on our gross margins, a positive impact, because the most expensive part of our instruments are in fact the magnets. So we're on top of that potential supply risk. Right now, we don't see any risk whatsoever to that, but in terms of like our planning for the next 2, 3, 4 years and how the world might be changing, yes, we have several different types of active plans to deal with that, so that just like the United States Department of Defense, we have good access to rare earth materials that are required in our products.
Interesting, thank you. I have a couple more. What is the difference between the 60 megahertz and the 100 megahertz devices? Does one replace the other, or do both have uses?
Thank you very much for that question. Yeah, so they do not cannibalize each other. They're targeting different segments of the market. And in fact, the 60 megahertz product was our initial product that we developed when we started our company. The 100 megahertz product was developed based on about 5 years of market feedback, mostly from pharmaceutical companies who've told us they love our product concept to be able to do this technique on the bench or in a manufacturing environment without the need for liquid helium. And by the way, there's no liquid helium trucks driving around in places like in Saudi Arabia and so on, and many parts of rural India where they're trying to build infrastructure. And it's more sensitive and more accurate is essentially what it is. And in this industry, people are willing to pay for more accuracy and more sensitivity. And sensitivity refers to the ability to detect smaller amounts of compound. And accuracy refers to the ability to, okay, if you can detect them, then you can identify them more clearly and or more accurately. So that product was developed, and we've announced it publicly, but we expect to start shipping it soon. We have a very large backlog of purchase orders, like legal purchase orders for that product, and we expect to start shipping to very soon. So one does not make the other obsolete. It's just part of a broader product family so that we can target different segments of the market that have different needs.
Great, thank you. I have 2 more questions. So again, if anybody has a follow-up question or a question, please use the question pane of the GoToWebinar control panel or the chat feature, and we'll get those questions answered. Next question is, how has COVID affected your sales cycle, and are you seeing it change at all recently? I guess as we open up or something.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there was some uncertainty associated with that, but I think we have a decent visibility on it now. The short answer is customers have not stopped placing orders for these instruments. We have not stopped manufacturing them. We've maintained full operations all the way through this pandemic. It has delayed some activity to some extent. That is true. But actually recently what we've seen is we've started to see companies focus a little bit more on their planning. So they kind of know how this is going to affect them, or they believe they know. And so they're sort of hunkering down and saying, okay, let's take this as an opportunity to upgrade our labs or rethink what our laboratory technology needs to be. I would say it's analogous to what, certain hotels and commercial real estate environments have been doing with taking advantage of this time to do certain renovations in expectations of a rebound. So we're seeing things that are analogous to that. And of course, everything in the world, everything that is in front of you right now is either tested and measured or should be tested and measured. And so we actually have opportunities that are related to the diagnostic field and do have some adjacency to testing for coronavirus and other types of microorganisms and so on. We haven't really thought of ourselves as a life sciences company and as a diagnostic company, but this pandemic has sort of shed light into opportunities that we haven't seen in the past. So I expect there to be something along those lines in the future, but no, coronavirus, COVID has sort of slowed things down a little bit for us, but to a large extent, it's been business as usual.
Great, thank you. And I believe the final question is, describe a little bit about how the cloud share function that Matt described works. Data share, I guess.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a few different aspects of how the cloud is important to us going forward. It's part of how we do customer service. It's how it's related to how customers can share data with each other if certain circumstances warrant that. It's also part of how we plan to do software as a service going forward. So a typical scenario might be somebody analyzes something very quickly, and then results are shown, but then more sophisticated analysis that might require more computing power that's available in the cloud. So then the data goes off onto the cloud and more sophisticated analysis is done, and then it goes to where it might need to be. And I think Matt gave law enforcement example of it being used by people that have geographic concerns about the spread of bad drugs and so on. But that concept also applies to other areas.
Well, excellent. Thank you. Doug, I'll turn it back over to you to turn it back to Shawn.
That's very interesting. I think we've gotten everybody's questions answered. So Shawn, do you have any closing comments for us?
Well, I would this is our first time in this with this exciting venue, and so we're thrilled to be part of this. And I would like to thank everybody for taking time out of their day to listen to our presentation, and we look forward to any follow-up. So please contact Matt or I if you have any questions or want to get involved in our company in any way. As I mentioned before, although we're not doing we're not formally marketing any kind of financing right now, we are aggressively pursuing our acquisition strategy. We had some pretty important roadshow plans in the United States, and of course COVID put a damper on that a little bit. So we're really looking to resurrect that activity, concurrent with the OTCQX listing that we just got. So if anybody has any ideas on how they'd like to get involved with our business, we're happy to talk to you. And we're always considered an absolute pleasure to speak with investors. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Shawn. It's really been very interesting.
And I just wanted to say quickly, because Matt is texting me to remind everybody of the ticker symbols. So I just want to reiterate that on the OTCQX, you can be found under NSCIF, and on the TSX-V, it is NSCI. So thank you, everybody, and have a pleasant evening. Oh, and on France, 1N1. Thanks, Matt. Take care, everyone.
Good
Thank
night.
you. Have a nice evening. Bye-bye.